The council chamber was silent, and silence inside that place was rare. Normally hundreds of alien voices argued, shouted, and filled the hall with endless noise. But this time, there were no arguments. There was only fear. A problem had appeared on the edge of the galaxy, something so dangerous that every species knew it could bring disaster to them all. The reports spoke of a dying star, but it was not a normal star. Its collapse had created storms of unstable energy that spread through space like fire. Whole planets were already at risk, and nearby trade routes had become death zones. Ships that tried to pass never returned. Satellites and probes sent to study the region were destroyed within minutes. Every calculation made by alien scientists pointed to the same truth. If nothing was done, the spreading energy storm would eat through half the galaxy in a few centuries. It would not be fast, but it would be unstoppable. The Council of Species had gathered to find a solution, but no one wanted to say what everyone already knew. The task was impossible. The oldest species in the chamber, the Varens, spoke first. They were tall, with skin like stone, and their voices carried weight. "We have studied the collapse," the Varen speaker said. "Our fleets cannot survive near the storm. Our shields break apart. Our weapons do nothing. We cannot stop this thing. We recommend retreat. Abandon the nearby colonies and let the region fall." A wave of whispers filled the chamber. Abandonment meant millions of lives lost. But one by one, the other species agreed. The Caliph, who were masters of energy manipulation, said their technology failed against the storm. The SHYR, who built the fastest ships, admitted none of their captains dared to enter the region. Even the proud Cthar Dominion, known for their endless armies, said the task was too costly and their soldiers would be wasted. "We will not do it," their warlord growled, and the other leaders nodded. The Great Council, made of over 50 starfaring species, had all come to the same decision. The task would be left undone. For a moment, the chamber felt lighter, as if everyone had escaped responsibility. Then the voice of the Council's moderator rose again. "There is one species that has not given their answer," the moderator said. "Humanity. What say you?" The hall shifted. Many eyes turned to the far corner where the human delegation sat. Compared to other species, they were young in the stars. Only 3 centuries had passed since humans left Earth and joined galactic society. They were considered reckless, unpredictable, and too stubborn for their own good. Many in the council expected them to stay quiet, to copy the decision of the older races. After all, what could such a small and inexperienced species do against something that even the ancients feared? The human representative stood slowly. His uniform was plain compared to the glowing robes and armor of the other leaders. His voice was calm, but it carried through the hall with a strange confidence. "We have heard your words," he said. "We know the danger. We know the cost. But if the task is left undone, the galaxy will suffer. If no one acts, countless lives will be lost. That is something we cannot accept. If everyone else refuses, then humanity will take the task." The words fell like a stone into a still pond. For a second, there was silence again. Then laughter erupted. The tall, insectoid rulers of the Caliph hissed with amusement. "Humans! You think you can survive where we have failed? You could not even defend your home world during the last war without our help." The SHYR delegates bared their sharp teeth in mocking grins. "Your fleets are small. Your science is crude. You will die before you even reach the storm." Even the usually calm Varens let out a rumbling sound of disbelief. To them, humanity's declaration sounded like madness. Yet the human representative did not back down. His expression stayed firm, his eyes hard. "Perhaps you are right," he admitted. "Perhaps we will die. But someone must try. If everyone waits, if everyone watches, then we are all already doomed. Humanity has decided. We will do it." The council chamber was filled with noise again, but this time it was chaos. Some species shouted that humans should be stopped before they wasted resources. Others argued that if they wanted to die, let them. A few even suggested that maybe humanity's foolishness could buy time for the others. Through it all, the humans remained quiet, standing like a small rock against a storm. The moderator finally called for order. "Very well," he said. "The records will show that all species refused this task, except humanity. The humans claim it for themselves. Let the galaxy watch what comes of this." The meeting ended, but the story was only beginning. Across the stars, the news spread. Every race learned that the impossible mission had been offered to the Council, and every race had refused. Only humans said yes. Reactions were mixed. Many laughed at the idea, calling it human arrogance. Others whispered that maybe humanity was insane. A few, however, felt a shiver of something they did not want to name: hope. On Earth, the message arrived. People watched the broadcast as their leader's voice echoed, "Humanity has accepted the task." For a long time, there was silence across the planet. Then, slowly, cheers began to rise. Factories opened. Shipyards roared to life. Engineers, scientists, soldiers, and volunteers came forward. The task was impossible, yes. But humanity had faced the impossible before. They had crossed oceans when others stayed on land. They had flown when others said nothing heavier than air could rise. They had reached space when even their own world doubted them. Impossible was only another word for challenge. Deep in their hearts, humans knew fear. But fear had never stopped them. In the quiet of space, fleets began to gather. Prototypes, weapons, and machines that no alien dared to test were loaded onto human ships. The first wave of explorers, soldiers, and engineers prepared to launch toward the storm. Behind them, the galaxy watched. Some waited for their destruction. Some waited for their surrender. But humanity only prepared for the fight. And in the shadows of the council chamber, one alien elder whispered words that none of the others wanted to hear. "If they succeed, the galaxy will never laugh at them again." The council chamber was filled with noise again, but this time it was not the noise of fear. It was the noise of laughter. The moment the human representative declared that his people would accept the impossible task, the room exploded with mockery. The insectoid Caliph delegates banged their clawed hands on the table, hissing with cruel amusement. Humans think they can fight the storm? Pathetic. Their ships will melt before they even see it. The SHYR, tall and wolf-like with gleaming teeth, leaned back in their seats, howling in laughter. One of them sneered, "Perhaps we should sell tickets. Watching humans march to their own deaths will be more entertaining than any arena." The armored Cthar warlord slammed his fist on the armrest of his throne, shaking the ground with his laughter. Fools! Do they think courage is enough? Do they think bravery can shield them from cosmic fire? We will enjoy seeing their bones float in the void. Even the usually calm and wise Varens, with their stone-like bodies and ancient voices, let out a rumble that sounded almost like bitter amusement. To them, humanity's choice was not bravery, it was ignorance. The entire chamber seemed united for the first time, not in fear, but in mockery of the one species that dared to step forward. The human representative stood in silence, listening to the insults, watching as powerful empires made jokes about the death of his people. His face did not change. His eyes remained steady, though his hands were clenched behind his back. He knew this reaction would come. Humanity was young compared to these empires, still learning, still building, still proving itself. To the older species, humans were reckless children. Yet there was no shame in his posture, only a quiet determination that did not break. When the laughter finally slowed, the Caliph leader hissed again. "Tell us, human, why do you risk everything? Do you believe you are stronger than us? Wiser than us? Do you believe your crude ships can do what our fleets cannot?" The human did not answer with anger. His voice was calm, almost too calm for the mood of the hall. "No. We do not believe we are stronger. We do not believe we are wiser. We believe only one thing, that someone must try. You call it foolishness. We call it duty." His words fell into the chamber, but instead of respect, they only caused more jeers. The SHY laughed harder, their sharp voices echoing off the walls. Duty. Ha! A pretty word for suicide. When your ships burn, when your people scream, remember this, the council warned you. The Cthar warlord leaned forward, eyes glowing red beneath his helmet. And when you die, human, remember also this, the galaxy will not mourn you. Your sacrifice will not matter. Your race will vanish like dust, and no one will remember your name. The Varen elder's voice was slower, but no less sharp. The galaxy does not need martyrs. It needs wisdom. You are too young to understand the difference. But for every insult, for every cruel word, the human stood unmoved. Inside, perhaps he felt the sting of their scorn, but he did not let it show. Instead, he looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of those who mocked him, and simply repeated, "We will do it." Those 4 words echoed louder than the laughter. For a brief moment, the jeers stopped, as if the chamber itself realized that humanity would not be shaken. Then the chaos began again. Some alien delegates shouted that the humans should be forbidden from trying. They argued that sending fleets into the storm was a waste of resources that could be better used elsewhere. Others suggested letting the humans go, not out of respect, but because their failure would serve as proof that the task was truly impossible. A few even laughed darkly, saying that perhaps the galaxy could use fewer humans anyway. In the back rows of the chamber, some younger or weaker species remained silent. They were not laughing. They watched the humans closely, their eyes filled not with scorn but with curiosity. These were the species who had always been pushed aside, who had always lived under the shadow of the powerful empires. They whispered among themselves. "They are mad," one said. "Yes," another answered, "but perhaps their madness is different from ours." The moderator finally called for silence. His voice was sharp, carrying authority. "Enough. The records are clear. All species have refused the task, save one. Humanity has chosen. It is their right." The council seal was struck, marking the decision final. The laughter faded, but smirks and cruel smiles remained on many faces. The meeting was over. The human representative turned and walked out of the chamber, his steps steady, his head unbowed. Behind him, the voices of mockery followed like shadows, but he did not look back. Outside, messages had already spread across the galaxy. News channels replayed the council meeting again and again. Everywhere, beings of different races watched the same moment, humans saying, "We'll do it." In the great cities of the SHYR, alien children laughed as their parents told jokes about human foolishness. In the military halls of the Cthar, officers drank and made bets on how quickly the humans would die. In the deep caverns of the Caliph, hissing songs were sung, mocking the small, fragile species that thought itself brave. Even among the wise Varens, scholars wrote essays explaining why humanity's attempt would fail, treating it as a lesson in arrogance. But not all voices were filled with laughter. On a distant moon, a young alien worker whispered to his friend, "They laughed at them, but they did not run. They did not hide. Maybe that means something." In another star system, a scientist from a small and often ignored species rewatched the human speech, pausing on his calm eyes, wondering, what do they know that we do not? On Earth, however, the reaction was very different. The broadcast was met first with silence, then with anger at the mockery, and finally with resolve. Factories lit up like suns. Workers poured into shipyards. Volunteers filled military bases. The laughter of the galaxy only made them stronger. Every insult became fuel, every doubt became fire. Humans had been underestimated before, and each time they had proved the doubters wrong. This time would be no different. The human leader who had stood in the council chamber returned home to deliver a message to his people. Standing before billions, his voice carried across the world, "They laughed at us. They mocked us. But we are not here for their approval. We are here because the galaxy faces danger, and we are the only ones who will act. Let them laugh. We will show them why humanity never quits." His words spread not only across Earth, but through every human colony. Soldiers repeated them before training. Engineers whispered them while building. Pilots etched them onto their ships. The laughter of the galaxy became the spark that lit a fire in every human heart. In the quiet corners of the council, a few alien leaders watched in silence. They said nothing, but deep inside, a question troubled them. Was humanity truly foolish, or was this the kind of madness that changed history? On Earth, silence filled the air for only a moment after the council's decision was announced. Then, like a storm breaking across the skies, the world moved. Humanity had accepted the impossible task, and there was no turning back. Governments called emergency meetings. Military leaders activated hidden projects. Scientists who had spent their lives designing theories too dangerous to test were suddenly given approval to try. The news echoed across every colony, every station, and every ship that flew the human flag. The council had laughed at them, but that laughter had only hardened their resolve. Factories lit up through the night. Sparks from welding torches rained like stars as shipyards worked without pause. In the orbit of Earth, half-finished vessels were pulled back into construction. Old warships, relics of forgotten battles, were dragged from storage and rebuilt with new systems. Even civilian ships were stripped of comfort and fitted with armor and weapons. Nothing was wasted because nothing could be. The task before them was unlike any battle they had faced. Humanity was preparing to enter the storm, and they knew most of them might not return. Yet no one turned away. Soldiers lined up in bases across Earth and beyond. Some were veterans, scarred from old wars. Others were young, barely trained, but their eyes burned with determination. They knew the council expected them to fail. They knew the galaxy was waiting for their deaths. But that only made them want to fight harder. In laboratories buried deep under mountains, scientists tested weapons never before allowed by law. Explosive warheads filled with unstable matter. Energy shields designed to bend and twist instead of break. Engines that could burn hotter and longer than safety regulations ever allowed. Some experiments ended in fire. Some ended in silence. But progress was made. Every failure became a lesson, every risk a stepping stone. For humanity, there was no such thing as too dangerous. If the galaxy thought them reckless, then reckless they would be, because recklessness was the only chance they had. Across the colonies, civilians played their part too. Miners dug deeper, pulling rare metals from the ground. Farmers produced more food, knowing the fleets would need endless supplies. Families said goodbye to sons and daughters who volunteered for the mission, not knowing if they would ever see them again. There were tears, yes, but there was also pride. No one spoke of quitting. Quitting was for the others. Quitting was for the great empires who had walked away. Humanity had made a promise, and they intended to keep it. In the middle of this preparation stood Admiral Elias Ward, the man chosen to lead the mission. He was not the strongest soldier nor the smartest scientist, but he had something more valuable. He had never known defeat. In his long career, he had faced enemies who outnumbered him, who outgunned him, who had better technology, yet he had always found a way to win. When asked why, his answer was simple: because losing was never an option. Now, standing in the war room of Earth's Fleet Command, he studied the endless charts and holograms of the storm. The energy waves rippled across the stars like a living fire. Around them lay wrecks of alien ships that had tried and failed. The machines that guarded the storm were still active, their weapons sharp, their traps deadly. It was a battlefield built to kill hope. But Admiral Ward did not look afraid. He only nodded once and said, "We'll need more ships." His officers saluted and returned to work. Plans were drawn, fleets were divided into groups, each given a role to play. Some ships would act as shields, taking the brunt of the storm's fury. Others would strike fast, breaking through enemy lines. And hidden among them were prototypes, strange human inventions that no alien had dared to use. Humanity had no illusions. They knew this mission was a gamble with terrible odds. But that gamble was better than standing still. Better than waiting for the galaxy to burn. In the Council's Grand Archives, the official records described humanity's preparation as delusion. Reports from alien spies called them desperate. But those who actually watched humanity up close saw something else. They saw unity. They saw a species that, for once in its history, set aside all divisions. Nations that had argued for centuries worked together. Colonies that once demanded independence sent their best to Earth. Rival companies shared technology. Even old enemies shook hands. The galaxy had mocked humanity for being divided, for always fighting among themselves. But when the impossible appeared, they did what no other species had done. They united. Weeks turned to months and the human fleet grew. Thousands of ships, some small and fast, some massive and heavy, floated in orbit like a swarm of steel. Their hulls gleamed in the light of the sun, their weapons charged, their engines ready. Inside them, crews trained for every possibility. They drilled in darkness. They drilled in silence. They drilled in chaos, learning to fight even when systems failed, even when hope was gone. Failure was not an option. Admiral Ward addressed them in a final broadcast before the first wave of ships departed. His face appeared on every screen, every terminal, every visor. His voice was calm, steady, and unshaken. "The galaxy believes we will fail," he began. "They laugh at us. They call us reckless. They call us fools. Perhaps we are. But better to be a fool who tries than a coward who hides. Remember this. We are not only fighting for humanity. We are fighting for every world that others abandoned. We are fighting for the lives they were willing to sacrifice. And when the storm looks into our eyes, we will not blink. We will not run. We will do it." His words were followed by silence. Then, across Earth and its colonies, people shouted, cheered, and raised their hands to the sky. Those who were leaving felt their courage rise. Those who were staying felt pride burn in their hearts. The preparations were complete. The fleets were ready. The galaxy still laughed, but it was a nervous laugh now, because deep down, some had begun to wonder. What if the humans were serious? What if they truly meant to do the impossible? And in the shadows of alien courts and palaces, where leaders whispered in secret, one question kept repeating. What if humanity succeeded? The day came when the human fleet was ready to leave. Above Earth, the sky was filled with steel and fire. Thousands of ships floated in orbit, their engines glowing, their weapons armed, their crews silent as they waited for the command. Families on the ground looked up, watching the swarm of vessels that blotted out the stars. They knew many of those ships would never return. But still, they raised their hands and waved goodbye, whispering prayers into the night. Inside the flagship Titan, Admiral Elias Ward stood before a massive viewport, staring into the dark sea of space. Around him, his officers waited, tense but ready. He gave only 3 words: "Begin the journey." Engines roared to life. The fleet moved in formation, breaking free of Earth's orbit, cutting through the void like a spear. As the planet shrank behind them, silence filled the cabins of the ships. Soldiers strapped themselves in. Scientists monitored unstable engines. Pilots whispered quiet words to the machines they trusted with their lives. Humanity had left home, and now they were truly alone. The Council watched the departure from afar. Alien observers, sitting in hidden stations, recorded every movement. Some smirked, already predicting how long it would take before the first human ship fell apart. Others placed secret bets, wondering whether the humans would even reach the storm before collapsing. Few believed the fleet would last more than a handful of weeks. Yet even among the Council spies, there were some who felt a strange unease. The humans were not running away. They were not hesitant. They marched into the unknown with a steadiness that seemed unnatural. Days turned into weeks as the fleet crossed the stars. Their route passed through empty systems, abandoned outposts, and broken relics of forgotten battles. Here and there, they found the remains of other expeditions. Alien ships, torn apart, drifting silently, their crews long dead. Evidence that others had tried this path and failed. Warnings floated in the darkness, recorded messages from desperate captains. Turn back, you cannot win. The storm is alive. The human crews listened, their faces grim, but no one turned the ships around. Fear grew inside them, yes, but fear was not enough to stop them. In the quiet of the mess halls, soldiers spoke softly about their families. Pilots told stories of home. Some admitted they were scared. Others admitted they had no idea what awaited them. But not a single one said they regretted coming. They were part of something greater now, something the galaxy had refused to face. One night, in the blackness of space, the first sign of the storm appeared. It began as a shimmer on the horizon, like the surface of water rippling under light. Then it grew, spreading across the stars, waves of blue and crimson energy twisting through the void. It was both beautiful and terrifying. The crew watched from their windows, some in awe, others in dread. The storm was alive with power. Sensors screamed with warnings. Energy spikes surged, enough to tear smaller ships apart. Gravity twisted and bent, dragging vessels off their path. Time itself seemed strange, seconds stretching and snapping like broken threads. The fleet slowed, adjusting formation. Shields flared bright as waves of unstable radiation struck them. Engines groaned. Hulls rattled. For the first time, humanity felt the weight of the storm's fury. And then they saw something worse. In the darkness near the storm's edge, lights moved. At first, they thought it was debris. Then the lights blinked, shifted, and formed into patterns. Ships. Hundreds of them. Their designs were alien, but not organic. They were machines. Cold, sharp, and endless in number. These were the guardians the Council had warned of. The forgotten machines that destroyed every expedition that came before. Their hulls glowed faintly with energy. Their weapons lit like stars. Their movements were silent, perfect, without hesitation. They had been waiting, and now they had found new prey. On the bridge of the Titan, alarms blared. Multiple contacts, the sensor officer reported. Hundreds, maybe thousands. They're locking on. Admiral Ward stood tall. His voice did not shake. All ships, prepare for contact. This is what we came for. Across the fleet, soldiers rushed to battle stations. Pilots gripped their controls. Engineers checked power flows, praying their shields would hold. The laughter of the Council was far away now. There was no one to mock them here. Only death waited in the void. The machine fleet began to move, a wall of steel advancing with terrifying precision. They did not send warnings. They did not hesitate. They fired. Beams of pure energy cut across the black, striking the outermost human ships. Explosions bloomed like fireflowers in space. Shouts filled comms. Damage reports screamed through channels. Yet the humans did not break. The first line of ships absorbed the blows, their shields flaring until they burned out. Behind them, strike groups launched forward, weapons blazing. Missiles streaked through the void. Cannons roared. Prototypes unleashed storms of plasma. The battle began. The storm roared around them, waves of chaotic energy crashing into both fleets, twisting paths, disrupting sensors. To fight here was madness. To fight here was impossible. And yet, the humans fought. Hours turned into a blur of fire and wreckage. Human ships were torn apart, their crews swallowed by the void. But for every vessel destroyed, another pressed forward. For every comrade lost, the survivors pushed harder. The machines did not understand retreat, but the humans did not understand surrender. Admiral Ward's voice cut through the chaos. Hold the line. Remember why we came. If we fall fighting. His words spread through every comm, steadying hands, sharpening courage. Outside, the machine fleet pressed harder, endless, merciless. But the humans refused to break. At the heart of the storm, unseen by most of the fleet, a shape waited in the darkness. Larger, deadlier, more terrible than anything they had faced yet. The machines were only the beginning. And as sensors caught a glimpse of it, fear gripped even the bravest hearts. Humanity had taken its first steps into the unknown. And the unknown was already reaching back. The void burned with fire as humanity met the storm's guardians. The first clash had already claimed dozens of ships, and yet the machines showed no sign of slowing. Their vessels moved with frightening precision, cutting through the chaos like predators born for war. Each one carried weapons older than humanity's entire spacefaring history, and they fired with deadly accuracy. Explosions shook the black sky, scattering debris that tumbled endlessly into the storm. On the bridge of the Titan, Admiral Ward stood among the chaos of reports and alarms. His officers called out damage numbers, shield losses, and crew casualties. Ward did not flinch. His eyes stayed locked on the enemy formations that shifted across the display like pieces on a chessboard. "They fight like a single mind," one officer whispered. "It's not an army, it's a machine swarm." And that was the truth. The machines did not hesitate. They did not retreat. They adapted instantly, striking weak points, surrounding isolated ships, cutting them apart without mercy. The fleet of humanity, for all its courage, was being tested in ways no council species had ever survived. The storm itself was an enemy too. Energy waves crashed into both sides, bending shields, distorting weapons fire, twisting gravity fields. Some machine ships were torn apart by the storm's fury, but more humans were lost. Pilots screamed as their vessels spun out of control. Crews fought to stabilize engines while alarms roared around them. Every second felt like the last. Yet humanity endured. Strike groups formed, broken ships rallied together, and weapons fired in desperate unity. Missiles screamed across the void, tearing holes into machine hulls. Cannons spat plasma into the storm, burning through the metal of enemies that had thought themselves indestructible. For the first time in centuries, the machine guardians took damage they had not predicted. On board the Titan, the comms lit up with cheers as one of the larger machine ships exploded in a burst of fire. Admiral Ward allowed himself a small nod. Good. Show them we are not prey. But victory was fleeting. The machines shifted, their formations tightening, their weapons recalibrating. They struck back with fury, cutting down human ships in blinding flashes. For every machine destroyed, 10 more seemed to appear. The swarm felt endless. And in the middle of the storm, something even worse revealed itself. Sensors screamed warnings as a shadow moved behind the enemy lines. Larger than any machine seen before, it emerged from the chaos like a mountain of steel. Its hull stretched for kilometers, bristling with weapons. It was not a warship in the way humans understood it. It was a fortress, a command mind, the heart of the swarm. "Contact! Massive signature!" shouted the sensor officer. "It's powering weapons." The Titan shuddered as beams of pure energy lanced out from the giant. A human battleship, the Valor, was struck clean through. In seconds, the proud vessel split apart, its fire lighting the void before vanishing into silence. The crew of the Titan watched in horror, but Ward's voice cut through the fear. "Focus. It bleeds like the rest. It can be destroyed." Across the fleet, humans tightened their grips, forced themselves to breathe, and attacked. Fighters screamed forward, weaving between enemy fire, unloading torpedoes against the giant. Frigates darted in and out, striking at its flanks. The Titan led the charge, its cannons roaring, its shields glowing white as they strained against impossible pressure. For a moment, hope flared. The giant shuddered under the assault, its armor cracking, explosions dancing along its surface. But then it answered. Waves of drones poured from its hull, small and swift, filling the storm like a tide of metal insects. They swarmed the human ships, latching on, drilling through hulls, tearing systems apart from within. Screams echoed across comms as crews fought the invaders hand-to-hand, blasting them in corridors, sealing off decks to slow their advance. In one ship, the Horizon, engineers locked themselves in the reactor room, fighting with rifles as drones clawed through the walls. The captain's last message was simple: "Tell Earth we did not run." Then the Horizon vanished in fire. The council spies who watched from distant outposts reported the battle with cold words. "The humans fight with madness," one wrote. "They do not break, even when breaking would be logical. Another whispered, "They bleed, but they keep moving forward." But the official reports carried a single prediction: humanity will soon fall. They cannot survive this. And still, the battle raged. Hours passed like years. The human fleet shrank, but it did not collapse. For every lost ship, another fought harder. For every comrade killed, another shouted louder. And deep inside the Titan, Admiral Ward stood unmoved. His uniform was scorched, his face lined with exhaustion, but his voice never trembled. "We are the shield. We are the blade. Hold, and strike." His officers repeated his words until they became a rhythm in the chaos, a heartbeat that kept them alive. Slowly, impossibly, the machines began to feel the pressure. The swarm was vast, but it was not infinite. The fortress was powerful, but it could not be everywhere at once. Human tactics, reckless, creative, unpredictable, broke through cracks in the perfect machine logic. Fighters pretended to retreat, only to turn and strike from behind. Frigates sacrificed themselves to drag enemy ships into the storm's deadliest currents. Whole crews gave their lives to buy seconds for others. And in those seconds, victories were carved. Another machine ship exploded. Then, another. Small cracks in the swarm became gaps. Gaps became breaches. Humanity was bleeding, but so was the enemy. As the fortress shifted, its weapons glowing brighter for a final strike, Admiral Ward clenched his fist. He knew the truth. This was only the beginning. The machines were testing them, measuring them, watching how far they could go. The storm was vast, the swarm was endless, and this was only the outer edge. But he also knew something else. They had survived the first contact. Where all others had died, humanity had endured. And that fact alone carried weight. On distant worlds, as reports of the battle leaked, alien leaders frowned. The laughter of the council was quieter now, not gone, but weaker. For the first time, the galaxy whispered not about human foolishness, but about the possibility that perhaps, just perhaps, they might go further than anyone had dared. The battle faded into silence as both fleets pulled back, the storm swallowing wreckage and fire. Humanity had won nothing, and yet everything. They were still alive. And as the Titan limped forward, its hull scorched, its crew exhausted, Admiral Ward looked into the storm ahead. His voice was low, almost a whisper, but it carried to every ear on the bridge. "We've seen the danger. Now we know. And we are still here." The storm was quiet now, but only in appearance. Behind the scattered wrecks and drifting fire, both sides prepared for what came next. Humanity had survived the first wave, and that alone was something no other species had done. But survival was not victory. Admiral Ward knew the truth. If they only defended, the swarm would crush them piece by piece. Humanity had to strike back. On the bridge of the Titan, tired eyes stared at flickering displays. The crew looked older than they had just a day ago, their faces drawn from sleepless hours and endless alarms. But when Ward stood, every head lifted. He spoke calmly, but with a weight that carried through the air. "We are still here. That means we fight. Not just to live, but to win." His words lit sparks in exhausted hearts. Across the fleet, damaged but not broken, men and women prepared for something no council record had ever dared, a counterattack against the storm's guardians. Humanity was famous in the galaxy for many things: its stubbornness, its chaos, its endless arguments, but above all, it was known for its creativity in desperation. Engineers worked like demons, patching holes with scraps, rerouting power through broken systems, and welding armor from the very wreckage of their own fallen ships. Pilots trained in simulators that barely functioned, running drills until their hands shook from exhaustion. Soldiers checked their rifles again and again, ready to fight drones in the dark corridors of any ship unlucky enough to be boarded. On Earth, broadcasts came from the fleet, sending fractured but powerful messages. They did not hide the cost. They showed the fire, the wreckage, the names of the dead. But instead of despair, the world erupted with unity. Factories that once built cars now built war machines. Shipyards worked without pause, birthing new vessels as fast as human hands and machines could manage. For the first time in history, every nation on Earth worked together, their arguments silenced by the knowledge that if humanity fell here, there would be no Earth left to argue over. While humanity prepared, the machines gathered. The fortress ship at the storm's heart recalculated. Its logic adjusted, its strategies sharpened. It had seen many species try and fail. It had seen courage burn out, and desperation turn to ash. But humanity was different. It did not yet understand why, but the calculations showed a risk that had never existed before. So it deployed more. The swarm doubled, then tripled, flooding the storm with cold steel and burning fire. If humanity was to fight back, it would have to fight against the impossible. Days later, the counterattack began. The Titan led the charge, its massive cannons firing arcs of plasma into the darkness. Behind it, the surviving fleet spread into attack formations. Fighters poured out like a storm within the storm, weaving through currents, dodging enemy fire, striking machine hulls with reckless precision. Humanity did not fight like the machines. It did not move in perfect patterns or flawless formations. It fought like fire, wild, unpredictable, and hungry. Squadrons pretended to flee, only to strike from the shadows. Battleships charged into the thick of the swarm, their weapons glowing white, before pulling sudden turns the machines could not anticipate. Frigates sacrificed themselves, dragging drones into the worst parts of the storm, taking hundreds of enemies with them in flashes of burning light. And through it all, the Titan moved like a hammer. It was the oldest ship, the most battle-worn, and the most vital. Every strike it made carved space for the others to breathe. Every blast from its cannons echoed through comms as a reminder, humanity was not prey, it was predator. For the first time in history, the swarm faltered. The perfect machine logic cracked under the chaos of human tactics. Machines collided when their calculations failed to predict human madness. Drones were lured into ambushes they should have avoided. The fortress itself shuddered under coordinated fire. On board the Titan, Admiral Ward stood firm. His voice rang out with orders, sharp and unshakable. Hit their core. Force them back. Make them remember us. His crew obeyed without hesitation. Every man and woman on that ship fought like their blood carried fire. But even as the counterattack tore holes into the swarm, the price was heavy. Human ships burned. Pilots screamed into silent space as their fighters exploded. Soldiers died holding corridors against drone floods. Names were read over comms in hurried whispers, then cut off by static. The fleet shrank again, but it did not break. And that was what made the difference. Hours into the counterattack, a massive explosion rocked the storm. One of the enemy's great carriers, a ship that had launched thousands of drones, was destroyed. Humanity's fighters had broken through its defenses and planted torpedoes deep inside its hull. The fireball lit the void brighter than the storm itself, and cheers erupted across every human channel. "They fall," someone cried. "They can bleed." The council spies who watched from afar could not believe their eyes. They had expected humanity to vanish by now. Instead, they saw the impossible. Machine wreckage floating beside human wreckage, the swarm wounded in a way no species had ever achieved. Reports flooded back to the council worlds, and the laughter that once filled their halls began to fade. A new word spread among the fearful whispers of alien diplomats: resistance. Humanity was resisting where none had. Humanity was fighting back. Yet Admiral Ward knew the truth. This was not victory. This was only survival extended. The fortress was still out there, untouched at its heart, calculating new strategies with every passing second. The storm itself still raged, tearing at both fleets with merciless hunger. And Earth's resources, though vast, were not infinite. But as he stood on the bridge of the Titan, staring into the storm's endless fire, he allowed himself a moment of pride. Humanity had shown the galaxy something it had forgotten, that the impossible was only impossible until someone dared to fight it. And fight they would. The counterattack had begun, and humanity had proven it would not go quietly into extinction. Whatever came next, the machines now knew this, humanity would not break. Humanity would not run. Humanity would fight back. The battlefield was no longer just a place of war, it had become a graveyard of steel and fire. Human ships drifted alongside shattered machine hulks, their wreckage glowing faintly in the violent storms. The counterattack had proven humanity's strength, but it had also revealed the terrible cost. Admiral Ward stood on the Titan's bridge, staring at casualty lists that grew longer by the minute. Every victory seemed to carve another scar across his people. He had pushed them to fight, and they had answered without hesitation. But now, he wondered how much more they could endure. Humanity had always been proud of its resilience, its refusal to bow even when the weight of the universe pressed down. Yet here, in the storm's endless void, that resilience was stretched thin. Supplies ran low. Hulls cracked under constant strain. Crews grew weaker with every sleepless hour, running on desperation instead of strength. And still, the swarm came. It was endless. Every time they cut down one wave, another arrived, stronger, sharper, faster. The fortress at the storm's heart was adapting, recalculating. Humanity had surprised it once, but surprise could only work once. Now the machine mind tested them, hunting for their limits. And limits always existed. Across the fleet, the breaking point drew closer. The smaller ships suffered first. Frigates and corvettes, fast but fragile, were torn apart in flashes of light. Their losses left gaps in formations that the machines exploited. Cruisers tried to fill the spaces, but even their armor bent under the storm's fury. The Titan itself groaned as energy beams scraped its shields raw. Ward heard the engineers whispering that the main reactor could not take another overload. But he gave no order to retreat. There was nowhere to retreat to. Behind them lay only Earth, vulnerable and unprepared. If humanity fell here, then the storm would consume the world in fire. Fear stalked every deck, but so did defiance. Soldiers taped family photos to the walls of their bunks. Pilots painted names on their fighters, promising to carry them into battle no matter what. Engineers sang while they worked, their voices shaking but steady, because silence was worse. Humanity was not giving up, even as the cracks widened. In the council chambers light years away, chaos spread. Reports from the storm poured in daily. The other species watched in disbelief. For centuries they had called humanity reckless, stubborn, primitive. Yet here was proof that those same traits had allowed humans to last where no one else had. The laughter that had once filled the chambers was gone. In its place came fear, and something worse, hope. If humanity could win, maybe others could too. But if humanity lost, it would only prove the storm unbeatable. Ward did not care about their debates. He cared about his people bleeding in the storm. And he knew the truth that none of the council wanted to face. The fleet could not hold forever. The machines pressed harder. One night cycle, as the Titan's crew struggled to rest, alarms screamed. A massive enemy strike force appeared from the storm, larger than any before. It was not random, it was targeted. The fortress had decided the Titan must fall. Dozens of heavy carriers advanced, their hulls glowing with lethal energy. Behind them, swarms of drones spread like a dark sea. Humanity's greatest ship was about to be drowned. On the bridge, Ward gave the order no commander ever wanted to give. All ships, form the shield wall. We hold the line. The Titan does not fall today. His words carried across the fleet, and every captain answered. Damaged cruisers dragged themselves forward. Frigates with shattered hulls took positions at the front. Fighters swarmed around the Titan like a cloud of gnats, ready to die to protect it. The storm exploded with fire. Energy beams cut through human ships, shredding them apart. But every time a vessel died, another took its place in the line. Humanity bled itself raw to protect the Titan, because they all knew one truth: if the Titan fell, Earth fell. Hours passed like years. Pilots screamed as they were torn apart. Captains whispered final words before their ships detonated. Ward stood silent, his eyes never leaving the tactical display. He could feel the breaking point closing in. He could feel the weight pressing down on his people's shoulders, heavier with every breath. Then it happened. The line cracked. A human cruiser, its engines gone, its shields drained, finally collapsed under the swarm's fire. The breach was open, and the machines poured through. The Titan was exposed. On board the great ship, klaxons screamed. Drones breached the hangars, flooding corridors with metallic claws and blades. Marines rushed to meet them, gunfire echoing through steel halls. Blood painted the floors, both human and machine. The Titan itself seemed to cry out in pain as impacts shook its hull. On the bridge, Ward gripped the console. "Hold," he whispered. "Hold." But deep inside, he knew the truth. Humanity was at the breaking point. Yet in that darkest hour, something strange happened. Instead of collapsing, the humans fought harder. Pilots turned their burning ships into weapons, ramming enemies at full speed. Soldiers detonated grenades in their own hands to take drones with them. Civilians, drafted as engineers and medics, picked up rifles and fought in the corridors. Humanity refused to break. And the machines, for the first time, hesitated. The fortress calculated again. It had seen resistance before. It had seen bravery before. But never like this. Never a species that pushed past the point of collapse and kept fighting anyway. Never a species that turned desperation into strength. The Titan's shields failed. Its armor cracked. Fires raged in its heart. But it still stood. It should have fallen. It should have died. Yet it lived. And that, more than any weapon, was the greatest threat the machines had ever faced. When the battle finally slowed, when the swarm retreated back into the storm's darkness, the Titan still floated. Burned, broken, bleeding, but alive. Across the fleet, silence fell. They had survived, but barely. Humanity had reached its breaking point. The only question left was whether they could rise again, or whether this was only the beginning of the end. The storm was quiet again, but it was the silence of a predator watching its prey. The human fleet floated in ruins. Ships burned like wounded animals, drifting among the shattered remains of drones and carriers. The Titan itself was alive, but only barely. Its armor was broken, its shields gone, and its engines weak. Admiral Ward stood on the bridge, staring at the wreckage. His people had survived the breaking point, but the truth was clear: one more attack like that and humanity would be finished. The crew knew it too. Faces were pale and tired. Voices carried the weight of despair. Yet no one spoke of surrender. They waited for Ward to speak, to give them a reason to keep going. And Ward did. "We cannot fight like this again," he said at last. "If we try, we will all die. The machines will not stop. The only way to win is to gamble everything." His words carried through the ship, and then across the fleet. Captains and soldiers listened, their eyes narrowing. Humanity was not broken yet. If there was a chance, no matter how dangerous, they would take it. Ward's gamble was madness, but madness was the only weapon left. They could not destroy the swarm by fighting it wave after wave. They had to strike at the heart, at the fortress hidden deep in the storm. Every calculation said it was impossible. No fleet had ever reached it. The storm itself was a shield of death. But humanity had already done the impossible by surviving this long. Perhaps, Ward thought, they could do it one more time. The plan was brutal in its simplicity. The Titan and the remaining heavy cruisers would push into the storm's center, drawing the attention of every machine. Meanwhile, a small strike force would break away and attempt to reach the fortress. If they could get close enough, they would unleash the most dangerous weapon humanity had, the experimental core destabilizer, a device designed to tear apart energy networks at their foundation. It had never been tested on anything this large. It might fail. It might destroy them all. But it was their only chance. The crews listened as the plan spread. No one argued. No one said it was too dangerous. They only nodded and prepared. Because if humanity had to choose between certain death and a gamble, they would always choose the gamble. Days passed as they repaired what little they could. Engineers worked with their bare hands, welding metal with improvised tools. Medics patched up soldiers who refused to rest. Pilots slept in their cockpits, ready to launch at a moment's notice. Everyone knew the next battle would be their last, win or lose. Ward walked the Titan's halls, speaking to crew members, shaking hands, meeting eyes. He told them the truth, that survival was not guaranteed, that what they were about to do could end in fire. But he also told them why they had to fight. Because if we do nothing, he said, Earth will burn. If we fall here, there will be no one left to stand. Humanity was given this task because others could not do it. We accepted it because we refused to run. That is who we are. And if this is our end, then we will make it an end the galaxy never forgets. His words lit a fire in tired hearts. For a brief moment, despair turned into determination. They were not just fighting for survival anymore. They were fighting for meaning, for proof that humanity's spirit was more powerful than the cold logic of the machines. Finally, the day came. The fleet formed into its final formation. The Titan took the lead, its broken frame patched with rough armor plates. Behind it came the cruisers and destroyers, carrying the strike team in their shadows. The storm roared as they advanced, lightning clawing at their hulls, tearing at their shields. The machines came quickly, swarming like a tide of knives. The trap was set. The Titan's guns roared to life, burning holes through the first waves. Fighters shot out like sparks, weaving between enemy fire. Human ships threw themselves into the fight with fury, their only purpose to draw every enemy toward them. It worked. The fortress responded with everything it had. More drones, more carriers, more firepower than ever before. The storm lit up with endless war, and in that chaos, the strike force slipped away. Ward watched them go from the Titan's bridge. He knew most of his fleet would not live to see them return. He knew the Titan itself might not survive. But he also knew that if the strike team reached the fortress, if the destabilizer worked, then humanity might just win. Hours turned into a blur of fire and death. Ships exploded one after another, their crews going down with them. The Titan's shields were long gone, its armor melting under constant fire. Still, Ward refused to give ground. Hold the line, he repeated again and again. Every second we buy is another step for the strike team. On the far edge of the storm, the small group of ships raced forward, slipping between energy surges and enemy patrols. At their core, hidden in reinforced cargo bays, the destabilizer hummed with deadly power. It was humanity's wildest gamble, a weapon as dangerous to its users as to its enemies. But the soldiers guarding it were calm. They had already accepted their fate. Back on the Titan, Ward stood at his post as explosions shook the ship. Fire consumed the lower decks. Drones crawled through the halls. Marines fought in brutal hand-to-hand combat, holding the ship together with their blood. Ward's officers begged him to retreat, to save what was left. But he shook his head. Not yet, he said. Not until the gamble is finished. Then, at last, a message came. The strike team had reached the fortress. The destabilizer was ready. Ward felt his chest tighten. This was the moment. This was the gamble. Everything humanity had fought for, all the blood, all the sacrifice, would be decided now. He closed his eyes and whispered, "Do it." The strike team moved through the storm like ghosts. Their ships were small, fast, and desperate. Behind them, the Titan and the fleet still fought, holding back endless swarms of machines. Explosions burned in the distance like dying stars. Every human who stayed behind knew the truth. They were fighting only to buy time. And that time was running out. The fortress loomed ahead, hidden in the heart of the storm. It was not a single structure but a living mountain of steel and fire, built into the storm's core. Towers of black metal rose from the raging lightning, their surfaces glowing with strange energy. It was beautiful and terrifying, like staring into the eye of a god. The strike team felt its power before they even reached it. Their instruments screamed warnings. Shields flickered. Hulls groaned. But they pushed forward. They had no other choice. At the center of the lead ship, Commander Reyes stood tall. She was chosen to lead the mission not because she was the strongest, but because she never stopped moving forward. She knew fear, but she never let it hold her. And now, as the fortress filled her view screen, she whispered to her crew, "This is it. No turning back." The fortress woke. Thousands of drones burst from its walls, more than the team had ever seen. They swarmed like living fire, surrounding the human ships in a sea of red light. The first blast struck, shaking hulls and tearing through armor. The humans answered with everything they had. Cannons fired, missiles screamed, fighters darted into the storm. The battle was chaos, pure fire in the dark. Reyes' ship dove through enemy lines, weaving between beams of energy. Her crew shouted coordinates, weapons fired until they overheated, and still the drones came. Every second, another human ship fell. Every second, the fortress drew closer. Inside the cargo bay, the destabilizer glowed with dangerous power. Engineers worked furiously, locking it into place. The weapon was unstable. If it detonated too early, it would destroy the humans before reaching the fortress. If it detonated too late, the machines would stop it. The timing had to be perfect. Reyes opened a channel to the Titan. Admiral Ward's voice came through, faint and broken by static. He was still alive, still fighting, though his ship was barely holding together. "We're here," Reyes told him. "We're inside the storm. Beginning final run." There was silence for a moment, and then Ward answered, "Make it count. Whatever happens, make it count." Then the channel died in a burst of static. The strike team charged. Their ships lit up the storm with fire, cutting through drones and breaking into the fortress's shadow. Lightning struck around them, tearing ships apart like toys. Reyes' second-in-command, Lieutenant Maris, cried out as his ship was hit, flames pouring from its engines. "Go!" he shouted over the comms. "Get to the target. Don't stop for me." His ship rammed into a swarm of drones, exploding in a blaze of light. The humans pressed on. They were down to half their number now, but still they did not stop. Reyes' ship was the first to reach the fortress wall. The black metal surface rose like a cliff, stretching higher than mountains. Weapons fired from hidden ports, tearing through human shields. The ship shook violently as systems failed. Reyes clenched her fists. "Bring us in close," she ordered. "Closer than they expect. We need to get the destabilizer right into their heart." The pilot nodded, his hands steady even as fire rained around them. The ship dove, skimming along the fortress wall, dodging towers of metal and streams of lightning. The drones followed, but human fighters cut them off, sacrificing themselves to give Reyes a path. One by one, the fighters fell, their explosions lighting the fortress like sparks against an endless night. Inside the cargo bay, the destabilizer was ready. Its power hummed like a living thing, filling the ship with a strange vibration. The engineers stepped back, their faces pale. "It's armed," one whispered. "If we release it now, there's no stopping it." Reyes looked at her crew. They were exhausted, wounded, but their eyes held no fear. Only resolve. She gave the order. "Release it." The cargo bay doors opened. For a moment, the storm's winds roared inside, threatening to tear the ship apart. Then the destabilizer dropped, a sphere of glowing light falling into the darkness below. Drones immediately turned, racing toward it. The fortress's weapons fired, trying to destroy it before it reached the core. Reyes' ship and the remaining humans dove in front of it, shielding it with their own bodies. One by one, human ships were ripped apart, but they bought the seconds the weapon needed. The destabilizer struck the fortress wall and buried itself inside. For an instant, nothing happened. The storm screamed. The drones swarmed. The humans braced themselves. Then, with a sound like the tearing of the universe, the fortress shuddered. Light exploded from its towers. The drones froze, their red eyes flickering. Energy waves rippled outward, tearing through metal and storm alike. Rhea's ship was caught in the blast. Her crew held on as alarms screamed. Fire raced across the walls. Did it work? Someone shouted. Reyes could not answer. She stared at the fortress as cracks of light split its surface. It was breaking. The destabilizer was tearing it apart from the inside. But victory came with a price. The weapon's energy was unstable, spreading faster than expected. The humans had seconds before the blast consumed them as well. Reyes closed her eyes for a moment. She thought of Earth, of the Council, of the laughter that once mocked humanity. They had said the task was impossible. They had said no one could survive this storm. And yet here they were, fire in the dark, proving them wrong. "All ships, pull back," she shouted. "We've done it. Now get out." Engines screamed to life as the surviving ships turned away. Behind them, the fortress roared like a dying beast. Towers collapsed, drones fell from the sky, and the storm itself began to unravel. Lightning dimmed, clouds broke, and for the first time in history, the heart of the storm flickered with light not of death, but of hope. Humanity had gambled everything. And against all odds, their fire still burned. The storm was gone. Where once lightning and fire had raged for ages, there was now only silence. The fortress was shattered, broken into drifting ruins glowing faintly as they cooled. For the first time in countless centuries, the space around the storm was calm. Human ships limped away from the wreckage, broken, scarred, but alive. Some were nothing more than burning hulks, barely held together. Others had lost engines, weapons, or entire decks. Yet they flew. They had survived. Inside the Titan, alarms still echoed, fires burned in half the corridors, and Admiral Ward was carried to the bridge with wounds across his chest. But when he saw the view outside, his eyes filled with something no battle could take from him: pride. The storm fortress, the task that no other species had dared face, was gone. Humanity had done it. News traveled faster than light, racing across the galaxy. The council chambers, once filled with laughter when humanity first accepted the impossible mission, were silent. Delegates leaned forward, eyes wide, voices caught in their throats. For centuries, the storm fortress had been untouchable. For centuries, the galaxy's strongest fleets had turned away, declaring it hopeless. They had given up. They had chosen safety. But humans, reckless and stubborn, had not. They had gone where no one else dared go, and they had won. The images of the battle spread through every world. The sight of human ships fighting inside the storm, of the fortress breaking apart, of fire lighting the dark, these were shown again and again. The galaxy could not believe what it saw. Many asked the same question: how? How did a young, small species, so new to the stars, achieve what ancient empires could not? The answer was whispered by soldiers, leaders, and even civilians who watched the footage. Because humans refused to quit. In the council chamber, an old voice finally broke the silence. It belonged to Elder Sarek, a being who had watched empires rise and fall. He spoke slowly, as though each word carried the weight of history. They were mocked. They were doubted. But they did not step back. Humanity has changed the balance of the galaxy. The chamber erupted with noise. Some species cheered, praising the humans as heroes. Others shouted in anger, claiming humanity was reckless, too dangerous to trust. And some sat in silence, understanding something the others could not admit: the galaxy had just witnessed the rise of a power unlike any before. On Earth, the news was met with tears and celebration. Cities lit up with fireworks. Families hugged their returning heroes, and names of the fallen were spoken with reverence. Humanity had paid a terrible price, but their victory had proven something no one could deny. When the galaxy quits, humans endure. When others give up, humans say, "We'll do it." On the Titan, the surviving crews gathered on the bridge. Admiral Ward stood, weak but unbroken, and looked at the tired faces around him. Many of those faces belonged to soldiers who had lost friends in the storm. Yet their eyes still burned with determination. Ward's voice was hoarse, but strong enough to reach them all. They said it was impossible. They said we were fools. But today, the fortress is gone. And the galaxy knows what it means to stand with humanity. The crew erupted in cheers, not for themselves, but for every life lost, every sacrifice made. They had carried the weight of an entire galaxy's doubt and thrown it back into the dark. Humanity's name would never again be spoken as weak or small. But the shock of their victory was not only about what they had destroyed. It was about what it revealed. If humanity could achieve this, something the greatest powers had failed to do, what else could they accomplish? What else were they willing to attempt when others would turn away? For some in the council, this thought was comforting. For others, it was terrifying. Rumors spread quickly. Some said the humans had discovered a new weapon, one too dangerous to exist. Others claimed the humans had made a secret alliance with unknown powers. A few even whispered that the humans were not like other species at all, that they thrived where others perished, that they were born for struggle. But in the hearts of common people across the stars, the truth was simpler. They saw a species that fought for hope even when all odds were against them. They saw a species that would not surrender. Humanity had become a symbol. In quiet corners of the galaxy, soldiers from other races asked themselves, if the humans can do it, why not us? Leaders who once scorned Earth now reached out with offers of alliance, knowing that to stand against humanity would be dangerous, but to stand with them could mean safety. The galaxy had shifted, and nothing would ever be the same. Back on Earth, a monument was raised in the capital. It bore no statue, no figure of glory, only a single line carved deep into the stone. All others quit. Only humans said, "We'll do it." People from across the galaxy came to see it. Some came in respect, others in fear. But none could deny its meaning. In a universe full of caution and retreat, one species had stepped forward and embraced the impossible. And because of that, the fortress was gone, the storm was broken, and hope had returned. In the end, the galaxy's shock was not just about the fortress falling. It was about the realization that a new force now stood among them. A force that could not be mocked, could not be ignored, and could not be stopped. Humanity had spoken, not with words, but with fire in the dark. And the galaxy would never forget it.